This is Random Comic Recaps Volume 1, the series where I go through my backlog of comics, reading them and giving everyone a quick synopsis. If you enjoy the idea of this series, go ahead and leave a like now, as it really does help and lets me know that you want to see more. With that being said, let's hop into Random Comic Recaps Volume 1. And yeah, I did change the name after the first couple. Random Comic Review Part 1. This is Harley Quinn, issue number 3 from the New 52. It's Valentine's Day, and Harley is not in the mood for romance. Everywhere she goes, she sees more reminders that she's alone. And after going home and taking a well-deserved bath, she ends up finding one of the plants that Poison Ivy left for her. The plant seems to have berries with an almost intoxicating aroma. Finally feeling a little better about herself, she decides to put on a new dress and hit the town. And she's almost hit by a bus carrying prisoners. The bus flips over and the prisoners are all able to escape, but something's not right. Something's come over all of these inmates. Harley runs for her life as they're all trying to chase her down, saying, "Yum." She ends up breaking into a local hardware shop. The scene quickly turns grim as there's a violent free-for-all for Harley. Thankfully, this is Harley Quinn we're talking about, and she is more than capable of protecting herself. And she definitely does. I mean, good lord, I'm starting to feel bad for these guys. Eventually, once things settle down, she makes her way out, where she's confronted by a cop, who goes in and plants one on her. Harley pushes her away and makes a break for it. That's when she realized it was the berries that were causing her to emit pheromones, so she gets rid of the plant. Random Comic Review Part 2. This is Action Comics issue 41, in which we see Clark Kent traveling through America after losing his powers. Weak and beaten up in Alaska, he finds a gas station and buys a, ironic, Superman shirt. That's when we find out Superman's identity has been revealed to the world, and everyone knows that Clark is Superman. Needing a quicker way to get back to Metropolis, he ends up buying a motorcycle off a guy at the gas station. He shells out $800 for it, which realistically isn't a problem. However, it becomes more of an issue when they realize that, hey, that was Superman. Demanding that he pays $2,000 for it, and they all jump him. He makes it out and goes on his way. Taking his time, he makes it all the way from Alaska back to Metropolis, where he's confronted by a bunch of cops when he gets back home. The city's been put on quarantine, trying to test to see if Superman's infected anybody with space cooties, apparently. Somebody gives the go-ahead and lets him in. After meeting up with Jimmy Olsen, it turns out that Clark's old neighborhood was basically turned into like a Superman fan club. But there's an attack on a Metropolis pier, and, powers or not, Clark's going to help. A beast known as a Shadow is attacking the pier, and Clark does all he can to help, while the police go to destroy his neighborhood. Random Comic Recap Part 3. This is Tales of Suspense number 93, originally debuting all the way back in 1967, and it features two separate stories, one about Iron Man and one about Captain America, and honestly, kinda wish comics still did that. Iron Man's story revolves around Tony Stark tracking down a villain named Half-Face, a very strange Vietnamese propaganda villain? Alright, moving on. But he comes in contact with the Titanium Man, and the two duke it out. And Tony's on the back foot. He needs to make an escape, but he can't. There's not enough room. So no joke, he activates roller skates on his boots. Gotta love the 60s. And even though he's pretty agile, Titanium Man completely stomps him, and goes to attack a Vietnamese village and blame it on the Americans. Meanwhile, Captain America is going to infiltrate AIM and rescue the love of his life, who he actually doesn't even know the name of. I'm not exaggerating, he only refers to her as Little Girl or Little Lady. He puts up a good fight but fails the escape. The AIM soldiers knock out Cap and steal the girl, before sending her to meet the person in charge, that being the mysterious new character, MODOK. Random Comic Recap number 4. This is Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 1. It was designed to be a soft reboot for the Marvel Universe and to allow new readers to come in without 60 years of backlog. It gives us new, revamped modern takes on classic characters, such as the Spider that bit Peter Parker, now created by Oscorp. Which, if that sounds familiar, it's basically been, every single origin of Spider-Man so far, minus the MCU. We see that Peter Parker is still the same nerdy kid as he always was, and is perpetually bullied by his schoolmates. But him and MJ are already close friends. In fact, she's his science lab partner. And Uncle Ben tries to do his own fatherly wisdom of pushing them in the right direction. Aunt May's worried that Peter might have some social anxiety, and Uncle Ben says it's nothing to worry about, he's just thinking. And of course, thank God, Norman Osborn is the same abusive, absentee father as he always was. On a school field trip, Peter gets bitten by the radioactive spider, gains the strength to stand up for himself, and passes out a lot, before doctors try to test his blood, leading to Oscorp picking it up and trying to take the young boy out, if you know what I mean. He finally gets his powers, and thus Spider-Man is born. Random Comic Recap Part 5. It's not an original. This is Action Comics number 1, the famed first appearance of Superman, with this part specifically created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And honestly, there's a lot of differences between the current Superman and the original version. In Action Comics number 1, he wasn't rescued by Ma and Pa Kent, he was actually just dropped off in an orphanage. He couldn't fly, he could merely leap an eighth of a mile and hurdle a 20-story building apparently. But at least he was still super strong and very durable. We see Superman breaking into a governor's mansion, ripping a steel door off of the wall to save an innocent woman's life. Where he goes back to the Daily Star, before it was the Daily Planet, to meet with his boss, who assigns him to personally track Superman.
Kind of like Spider-Man, isn't it? He gets a tip about a man beating his wife, and subsequently scares him so bad that the man actually passes out with fear. He asks Lois Lane on a date, and she actively despises Clark. She ends up slapping a guy in the face who was kind of a jerk, and then he tracks her down and kidnaps her. But luckily, Superman was there to save the day, and hey, look, that's the famous cover. Oh yeah, then he beats up a lobbyist that was trying to start World War II.
Random Comic Recap Part 6.
This is Daredevil issue number 26 from 1967, written by Stan Lee. And it features the greatest supervillain ever made, that being Stiltman. I mean, just look at him, he's perfect. Our story begins with Matt Murdock using every acrobatic tool in his disposal to get back home. And when he does, he decides he's going to don a new personality, that being Mike Murdock, his own fictional twin. Okay. In Matt Murdock's own words, Mike isn't going to be a tight-laced conservative like Matt. Instead, he's going to be more fun. And basically, he just flirts with Karen the entire time. And thoroughly annoys Foggy, who, by the way, we actually learned from Mr. Farnham, the building manager, is actually going to be defending Leapfrog. Defending this guy from She-Hulk. Anyway, moving on. During the court case, Leapfrog makes his escape, where Stiltman is there to rescue him. So, of course, Daredevil and Stiltman begin to brawl. And I mean, it gets pretty intense. Also, what the hell is Matt doing there? Meanwhile, a villain named the Masked Marauder breaks into Nelson and Murdock's office, where it's revealed it's the building manager himself. Stiltman's brought down. Karen thinks Mike is Daredevil.
Random Comic Recap Part 7.
This is Damage Control issue number 1, written by the late great Dwayne McDuffie, and you might recognize one of his other creations, that being DC Static, or Static Shock if you remember the cartoon. Our story begins with the Avengers fighting a giant robot in the middle of Manhattan, and they're causing all sorts of ruckus. I mean, they're knocking down buildings and clock towers. That's when we're introduced to the main character of this story, John Porter, late for his first day of work for Damage Control. He thinks he can make an excuse by saying, hey, sorry I'm late, there was a freaking building knocked down in the way. But Damage Control is an organization created to clean up the messes that superheroes make. He meets the leader of the company, Mrs. Hogue, who introduces him to the rest of the crew. Specifically this woman here named Robin. She was actually up for the job that John got. She's definitely not bitter about it at all. She introduces him to his first client, that being this man, Mr. Washington, and he is utterly distraught because his building was damaged. What building, you may ask? Well, oh, yikes. Yeah, this is an old comic. They eventually get the robot up, transform it into a car, and call it a day.
Random Comic Recap Part 8.
This is The Flash issue 225, and it features an unlikely team-up between Professor Zoom and Barry Allen, but you'll see why. It's 1973, and Barry Allen and his wife Iris are out at the movies, when this weird horse monstrosity creature decides to crash through the building. Thinking quickly, Barry dons his suit and gets everyone to safety. Meanwhile, Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, gets an alert that Barry needs help. The two of them work together and get absolutely demolished by this beast. The two heroes discover that this synthos-steed came from the year 2473, so they travel to the future. Okay, but Barry's not the one who's able to time travel at this point, somehow it's Green Lantern? What? After speaking with a local, they find out that all horses pretty much went extinct a couple decades ago, and these new synthos-steeds were created by Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. They meet up with Eobard Thawne, who's rocking the sickest comb-over in the world, and says he'll help take out the synthos-steed in the past, but Green Lantern has to steal a piece of priceless art now. So Hal does and fights a 25th century Green Lantern, while Professor Zoom and Flash go back to the past, but they stomp out the horse, and Zoom was behind it all along.
Random Comic Recap Part 9.
This is Amazing Spider-Man issue 59, written by Stan Lee with art by John Romita. Our story begins with Spider-Man being hunted by the cops, and he goes to check on Aunt May in the hospital. And the doctor comes in and says, hey Peter, you were listed as a missing person. So Peter goes to the police station and is swarmed by tons of questions, because apparently the Daily Bugle said that Spider-Man kidnapped him. Big surprise. George Stacy, Gwen's dad, brings him back home and says, hey, I have these films, I think that Spider-Man's actually a good guy. Then Gwen comes home and sees that Peter's okay. She's very excited to see him, and then they all go hang out with Harry Osborn. That's when we learn that MJ was hired to be a go-go dancer, but the people who employ her are nefarious, to say the least. In between rounds of her go-go dancing, they want her to go around with a camera taking photos of people at tables marked with stars. I mean, at first it seems pretty innocuous, till you realize the person who made the camera is the brainwasher. So after attempting to kidnap George Stacy, Spider-Man busts onto the scene, where he's able to fight off an entire group like it's nothing. However, one of the bad guys uses MJ as a human shield. Things get worse when Kingpin shows up.
Random Comic Recap Part 10.
Oh, jeez. This is Batman the Red Death, issue 1. And our story starts with some narration saying some universes were created just to be destroyed. We see something is chasing Barry Allen, the Flash, and Central City is being ripped apart. That something was Batman. Kinda already feel like this should be a Frank Miller story. Batman tracks Barry down and tells him he needs the Speed Force. He can save everyone. And Barry says, no, that's not happening. So, of course, the ever-emotionally stable Batman does what any good friend would do in that situation. He knocks out Barry Allen, straps him to the front of the Batmobile, and floors it into the Speed Force, fusing the both of them into one new being. Because that's what happens when you tell Batman no. Back in Gotham, rioters and looters have basically taken over the city, with Scarecrow about to take out a couple of people. When suddenly the new fusion of Batman and Flash comes in and, oh no. He proceeds to delete the rest of his rogues gallery before hopping over to Earth Zero, draining the life force out of Iris and Wally West, before bodying that Earth's Barry so hard that Dr. Fate saves him and causing chaos.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like as it really does help. Consider subscribing to help us get to 100K. And if you'd like to support the channel further, consider becoming a member. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.